Hi everyone, Patricia Worby, Alchemy Therapies here, and I'm just talking today about anxiety again. I did a podcast last week, actually maybe 2 weeks ago, on anxiety, and it obviously really hit the nail on the head because I had a lot of interest. And I just wanted to follow up because anxiety is something we all suffer from time to time, but some people have it as a ongoing, perpetual feeling of complete and utter panic. And I think it's a really underdiagnosed and under-recognized problem in our society at the moment. And we don't understand it. Certainly our medical model doesn't understand it. So we get terrible anxiety. Usually it's worse in the morning for a lot of people. And there's a good reason for that. It's to do with blood sugar and how the brain regulates that. When your blood sugar drops and then your body has to try and pump more glucose into your blood to raise the blood sugar level, that often is done by your adrenals. Cortisol and adrenaline are the hormones for that. And when that pumps out, if it overpumps, it overcompensates for the drop, you get a surge of anxiety. So that can often wake you up early in the morning. Used to do that with me. 3 a.m. I'd be wide awake, heart pumping, feeling absolutely scared stiff of something. And I didn't know what. It's just a generalized anxiety. Now, when you understand that it's linked to what's happening in your body, there are things you can do to help regulate your blood sugar. And that's not my forte, so I'm not going to talk about that today, but it's a really big part of helping yourself heal. That's the body component, if you like, is getting more protein and more fat, good fats into your diet and less carbohydrates. But as I say, not talking about that today, but just wanted to raise the fact that there is a physical component as well. Now, from the mental part, we know, as I mentioned in my first video, anxiety is a symptom of something that is trying to get your attention. It's your body's way of saying, hey, there's a problem here. There's an emotion or a memory or a feeling that hasn't been resolved in you. For many people, that can be guilt, betrayal, bereavement, and loss. These are the deep, complex emotions that require a lot of processing in order to be resolved in the mind. And we often don't allow ourselves that in our culture. So I had a call from someone this morning who's really suffering a lot of guilt over the death of her father and not being there when he was dying. And I know that was my issue too. I lost my father when I was 19. That's interesting we say that, isn't it? Lost someone. He died in hospital when I was away at university. I had just gone to university. First day of my term of my first year. What about that for timing? And I knew he wasn't well and I knew it was serious, but he'd been in and out of hospital most of my teenage years. So I really didn't think anything of it. And then when he actually died, it was such a huge shock. And I was away from home and not able to really process that. I chose not to come back. I chose to carry on with my studies, and that was a long time ago now, as you can probably tell. But I was 19, and I made the best decision I could. But I suffered with an awful lot of guilt because I had left home at that point and he died. And in the part of the brain that kind of works these things out, it is making a very basic assumption. It's not a very sophisticated part of your brain. It's the limbic brain and your brainstem, and together they're generally called the back brain. And they're not the thinking, logical parts that deal with language and analysis and reason. They're very basic, and they're geared towards survival of the organism. And they tend to look for threat. And threat can come from many sources, including these uncomfortable feelings, which over time, if you don't process them, if you don't metabolize them as over, the brain becomes fixed in this pattern of playing the emotions through and regarding them as an internal threat, because they create stress in your body. Those kinds of emotions are very stressful. particularly guilt, betrayal, because they imply that you somehow are at fault. Something you did or something that somebody did to you was a problem and hasn't been resolved, and you're either very guilty feeling or you're very angry. Women particularly suffer from this more than men, and men, it's worth saying, have a slightly different physiological response. They have more testosterone, therefore less need for adrenaline, and their hippocampal makeup, so the part of the brain that deals with memory, is slightly different. And so there are gender differences in this. Women tend to internalize emotions much, much more. Men are more likely to, I'm sorry, guys, if you're listening and you're saying, I'm not like that, I'm really sensitive, but men tend to externalize more. Some obviously don't. Some will ruminate and become depressed, and we're seeing a rise in that as well. Some will become so ill and so unsafe in themselves that they will turn to addictions. And some people, of course, end their lives. And that's something I wanted to touch upon as well today, that feelings of suicidality, so feelings that you need to kill yourself in order to stop the suffering, is a really common side effect of chronic anxiety and chronic depression, because basically the brain perceives that you are suffering, and it's emotional pain that you're suffering, but you start to disconnect from those emotions because they're too much, and the brain decides erroneously that you can't handle it, and so it represses the emotion. Then you've got a limited number of choices. Bear with the anxiety that is the symptom, that is the body shouting at you, there's something you need to do here, or consider ending the pain. And how do you end the pain if you have no choices, if modern medicine just suppresses the symptom or sends you for CBT, or in this country there are various courses you can go on to learn how to manage your stress, but none of them deal with the underlying issue, which is that you haven't metabolized a deep set emotion. So suicidal thoughts are not actually true. They are your brain's best guess at what you could do to end the pain. You see, it's looking for answers all the time, your rational brain. And it's saying, hang on, the deep brain is in trouble here. We feel like we're about to expire with this pain and this suffering. We need to find a solution. And so often people get these horrible feelings that they might as well not be here. I myself had this, so I'm not talking theoretically here. I can remember driving, feeling so bad that I thought I could just veer off the road at this point. You know, that's something I could do. And then coming to and thinking, my God, did I really think that? That's really frightening. And then, of course, you frighten yourself further because you're having these thoughts and feelings which feel like you want to end your life. Now, I'm not trying to minimize this for people that do unfortunately go through with that. But the point of this video today was to say that actually when you look at this as a reflex reaction of your brain to the pain and the suffering that you're going through, and not as the true reason that you need to kill yourself, it's just your brain's best guess to what might work, then you can stop being afraid of the feelings when they come up, you know, the feelings that you want to end your life, and just see them for what they are, as a reflex. Then you can start to get out of this anxiety loop where the feelings trigger more fear and the fear triggers more feelings. We really have to show you that there is another way. For me, at the time when I was suffering this, I didn't know any of this stuff, and I went through the drug route. And I don't mean illicit drugs, I mean prescription drugs. And I went on to sleeping tablets, antidepressants, antispasmodics, all sorts of things. And I was left feeling completely zombified for most of the time. Didn't really reduce my anxiety, it just sort of numbed it out. It wasn't until I went for initially counselling to look at what I hadn't metabolized that I started to realize there was all this stuff in me that hadn't been dealt with, that the grief and the guilt was still there. Now, today, it's a very different story. We have so many more options, but you won't hear about them at your doctor's surgery. EFT, or emotional freedom technique, is a fantastic model for dealing with anxiety, because it says that we have to go into the part of the brain that is generating and metabolizing these feelings but has got stuck. This is your back brain, your limbic system, and your brainstem, and they're very ancient parts of your brain. And they get their information from sensation, from your blood supply, from what's going on, the thoughts you're thinking, the light that's entering your eyes, the sensations of touch and sight. And so we have to approach this through sensory information. And EFT, or tapping, is one model, one way of doing this, that uses touch to stimulate parts of your brain that have become stuck and fixed in this pattern of anxious thoughts. And so I'm not here to demonstrate tapping today. That's another video. You'll see it on my website and also on my YouTube channel. But basically, tapping uses the fingers to tap on the head and neck in a certain sequence. That might sound like cloud cuckoo land to some of you. How can that possibly make a difference? But we know it does when you are feeling the feeling that you're trying to metabolize. It's not just tapping. It's how and what you're thinking at the time you're doing it. So you make certain statements while you're doing that, like this guilt, this pain, this suffering. I'm learning it's over. I'm a good person. It's over. I'm here. I'm safe. Things like this. Very powerful, very simple. Works better with another person that knows what they're doing and can hold you visually with eye gaze and their body language that says you're safe. But you can do it on your own. And there are many videos online, not just mine, obviously, many videos showing you how to tap. But initially, I would say go and see a practitioner who knows what they're doing, who is trauma informed, because make no mistake, these unresolved emotions are the basis of trauma, emotional trauma I'm talking about. So that's one way of dealing with it. But you need to be guided through the whole process. You need to be able to acknowledge the feelings that you have that haven't been allowed, that you haven't dealt with because they felt too dangerous, too frightening, too overwhelming. That's another thing that most people feel is, I'm going to be overwhelmed if I open Pandora's box of all the emotions that I've not dealt with. But that's not how the mind-body works. The mind-body, I deliberately put them together there, is able to filter out what you can handle and what you can't, and it usually releases them in little bite-sized pieces for you. So you can metabolize these emotions later on, many years sometimes after they've happened, but you need guidance and you need help. And that's what I do. That's what I do. I help other people to resolve their feelings of anxiety. So for anybody out there who is suffering, I would really encourage you to look up psychosensory therapy, or EMDR, which is another form of sensory therapy, which uses either touch or eye movements to stimulate the parts of the brain that are stuck in this anxious cycle. There are solutions out there. You do not have to suffer. You can resolve this and live a joyful, connected, and wholehearted life. I'm here to prove it, and I work with people all the time who are at their wits' end and think they're going to die, and say to me, everyone virtually says to me, am I too far gone? I'm probably too far gone, aren't I? And I won't make it. Because that's the rational brain making its best guess of what's going on and telling you won't make it. It's not true. You can, you will, but you need help. So I hope that encourages some of you to reach out and don't suffer. It's not necessary to suffer. We have the tools out there. We have many different tools. And I've just given you 2 today, but there are many others. Okay. Lots of love to everyone. Take care, people. Talk soon.